Hey everyone, hey, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching The Watchmen. This is our second episode, very, very new podcast. Very excited to be doing this though. First episode was a lot of fun to do. We are going through the entirety of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen, which is, #1 New York Times bestseller, one of Time Magazine's best novels of all time. Just a genuinely brilliant, a masterpiece, really, I think, in myself and Def's eyes. And as I say, I'm joined, Tom Kwei, myself, I'm joined by Deffinition. How's it going, man?
What's happening, everyone? How's it going? Thanks for checking this out.
Yeah.
Remember, we are a podcast now as well, so get yourself on the bloody
Exactly.
iTunes podcast store and press subscribe. Press it 3 times, so don't press it twice because then you've unsubscribed, but press it 3 times to make sure that you're definitely listening.
Yeah, so, we didn't make it clear on the first episode because we weren't actually a podcast, but now we are. So, search us, as Steph says, Watching The Watchmen. We should be available on pretty much any service, iTunes, Downcast, Pocket Casts. If we're not available, let us know and we'll submit the feed and you'll get it available there. So, we're also...
How do they let us know, Tom?
Well, that's thanks for asking, man. There is the best way is a Watching The Watchmen pod at gmail.com, which I appreciate is quite a long sort of moniker there, sort of address, but on our thumbnail it's there, on a description. But Watching The Watchmen pod, all one word, at gmail.com. Get in touch with us there. Let us know if you can't access those. Let us also, what we really want is, how did you get into Watchmen? Where are you listening from? Great to hear from people. Always answer back, on the show and via email as well. Let us know what you know, what you like about Watchmen, what issue we're on, what opinions you have, things you disagree with, what you said, agree, echo, whatever. So Watching The Watchmen pod at gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us there. We're also on iTunes. But, you're joining us on the second chapter, as it were, the second issue, Absent Friends, which is a fantastic issue. And I guess, generally, before we get into this, Steph, the contents of this particular portion of the story, loads of great sort of insight to the past.
Yeah, it's really dark as well. It's kind of where you realise how much of a bad guy the comedian was.
Oh, yeah.
So this is like his funeral basically takes place across this entire issue, and everyone's remembering all the good that he did.
Right. It is ridiculous, isn't it? Because if you sort of anticipate the first issue and just reading it off that out of context, you kind of, the comedian, I can't remember exactly what's revealed about him. Obviously there's something shady, but it's nothing too explicit. Like, it's more mentioned than actually shown. But in this we get, 2 scenes specifically that are some of the fucking most heinous things a human can do, really. But, he ironically does both of them. And as ever, we always have to start with the cover, which obviously, as you say, transitions into the first panel. I love the cover. Am I the only one that's seeing, maybe it's a little obvious, a sort of the blood splatter as the tear of rain?
Yeah, there's a little tear coming out that statue. Normally she's a bit of a statue,
right?
But she's shedding a tear this time.
Yeah.
So. Write that joke down. I'm not copywriting that joke.
No, that is
stand up if you want.
Yeah, Watching The Watchmen pod at gmail.com, let us know. But I mean, it's what I like about the statue is it's realistic in the sense that it's quite beautiful from afar, as we've seen in the first panel, but up close it's very dirty and grimy. Yeah,
it's really and it like the hair especially is just covered in loads of crap.
Yeah.
You can sort of see the background of the city with the Zeppelins as well.
Yeah.
There's an Empire State Building just in the far right corner. I didn't even see it just in the page. But if you rip that page out, tear it out your book right now, you'll actually see in the corner there's the Empire State Building. So it sort of gives a place. There's also another Zeppelin up at the top, so you can kind of see that it's a bit of a New York, but it's got a little different things going on that you would normally see.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the geodome as well, sort of underneath her chin, isn't there, or whatever that is, which I guess kind of you might see in modern cities. And also, there's like the antenna dish, I think, on that roof as well, the lower roof. But I mean, that might be some sort of reflective thing. But I mean, it's the image, isn't it? Because it's kind of what they wanted to make you feel. Like, obviously, it is just a statue with a tear, as you say, but the kind of a weeping angel as the intro image is very ominous.
Yeah, especially at a funeral. Like, a lot of people go to funerals and just stand about crying, and that's sort of trying to look dignified, and that the statue's kind of summing that up. It's very dignified, but it's given a little bit of emotion here.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the sort of the falsities of of appearance, as well as we kind of, we encounter a lot of the real raw truths of the comedian. And, we see throughout Watchmen, it's, it kind of avoids just straight linear storytelling. There's lots of juxtaposition, lots of multiple things going on at once. And I love the fact, I just think it's very playful on their part, that they mix the kind of just a mother and daughter kind of bickering with, kind of dark history, but nothing too much, with a very kind of monotone, kind of somber funeral.
Yeah. I mean, the issue opens on a funeral. It's a bit like Batman v Superman, eh?
Right.
There's a little slide dig there.
Hashtag Martha.
Yeah, hashtag Martha. Why did she do it? So, yeah, it's a really good contrast. You kind of get in New York contrasted with California.
Yeah.
And, like, stereotypically, New York's quite drab and raining a lot and always at night. And California's, like, bright and sunny. But the emotions that the people are given in both are really negative. So it just kind of shows that no matter where you are, you're probably upset about something.
And there's lots of parallels drawn between, such as, Laurie having the flowers, and then the flowers also being present in the following scene, the same red that's kind of, transmitting between. And I love the... I
didn't actually make as many notes on these first couple of pages. Like the last issue was literally just jam-packed with them on the first page, whereas this seems kind of straightforward in a way. Like there are little things like Rorschach walking by. I mean, if you were reading this issue by issue, you probably wouldn't pick up that that's the same guy from the first comic. And even if you did, you probably still wouldn't think, oh, that's Rorschach. You would just kind of think, oh, this is just the world that they live in. But yeah, not a lot in these first pages really goes on that. There's like of significance other than the Silk Spectre past and present both argue and they stand around at a grave.
But I mean,
did you pick up anything?
There was a few things. I agree. Narratively, there's nothing too much. There's a few things that kind of just make me sort of smile and question the logic of the story. For example, I love how Dr. Manhattan is driven, even though obviously he can just teleport at will, which is kind of a nice sort of. I don't know. It's kind of obviously he's still a government kind of operative at this point to a certain extent. So I guess, and he's wearing a suit as well, which is kind of. Quite cool that we see him. But yeah, just little things like I always like the way Dave Gibbons is such an intelligent illustrator in the sense where we see in the second panel the nostalgia issue, which is obviously Adrian Veidt's kind of thing. And then in the fourth panel, the sort of the N is upside down because we're seeing it from a different angle, and it's just the way it plays with space is excellent as well. And one of the things that I always notice as well about the older Silk Spectre, she's pretty old. Like she's not ugly, but she's kind of she's got sparky white hair.
Yeah, she's like really old looking, really beat up, and it is kind of at the time I suppose you'd never ever seen a retired superhero. I mean, like I kind of covered it in the last issue, but superheroes at the time were immortalized in comics, and Superman was always 30 years old, Batman was always 30 years old, and to see that they've had this life and they're now just some old decrepit person sitting waiting to die in a retirement home, it's kind of almost humbling in a way, and it's sort of out of the norm. Like you are hit with the realization that if people were to do this in real life, eventually if they lived long enough, they would get to a point where they were pretty much useless and weren't able to offer anything to society really, like they used to. And obviously they would be so reminiscent. Like one of the key characteristics of Silk Spectre Senior is that she literally talks about the past non-stop. She never talks about anything other than like what she's even went so far to the point that she got raped, and she's looking back on it fondly.
I know
this woman has nothing to look forward to. She even says like the future looks darker and darker every day, whereas the past, even I'm paraphrasing, but even dark stuff in the past gets brighter. So it's kind of a bit of a, I don't know, it's a bit shocking to see an old person. And then obviously Frank Miller after this would go on to do The Dark Knight Returns, which deals with an older Batman. But this was really innovative for the time. And it is kind of jarring to see that these heroes of old have just turned into like bags of mush, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we had Hollis the visit before with Dan in the first issue, and obviously Hollis and Silk Spectre Senior will speak. In a later issue, I believe, when Hollis dies, I think so. And it again uses the East-West paradigm to sort of constrict their fortunes. But it is mad where she says, "Poor Eddie," Laurie's like, how can you even say that? And it's 40 years ago for him. So, and that's one of the things that you've really got to gauge with Watchmen, I think. And I tried to keep this in mind reading the Minutemen story. Like, this takes place over 4 decades. Like, it's quite a long. Like, the Minutemen were together for 10 years. Like, there's a lot of kind of history that sometimes it can feel quite yesterday and yesteryear, but it's a very generational thing.
Yeah, definitely. And are Silk Spectre and Night Owl the only 2 surviving members of the Minutemen?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I think Mothman's in like a madhouse, but all the rest. So
it is kind of the 2 surviving members are both like, just not doing too well.
No.
And an interesting thing I've just kind of noticed that in the bottom right panel when Eddie's coffin's getting carried, everyone other than Dr. Manhattan's looking at it and looking down, whereas Dr. Manhattan's just looking off like he doesn't really care. He's just being there for ceremony. And that kind of ties into a lot of the things that are mentioned in this issue and later in the book, saying that Dr. Manhattan's lost his caring and understanding for humanity. I mean, even if you look on page 3, I know I'm skipping a bit,
right.
But he's the only one not looking at the coffin as well. So it just seems like he's there for the sake of being there.
Yeah.
Which kind of ties into him getting driven there, and it's just kind of like he's appeared to be there because the government have said, we need you at this funeral.
Yeah, no, you're right, actually, because that image on page 3, I initially wasn't sure how to read it. Is it him kind of feeling like somber and, remorseful? But I think you're right, actually. You can see that he is just detached, in this sense of ceremony, because obviously to him death isn't this kind of final thing in a certain molecular sense. Another thing that I like from that bottom right panel, you see it more clearly on the later panels of the funeral. Adrian has like a guy with an umbrella and a little like you know what I mean? He has a butler. Like carrying with the V on his hat.
You can also, and you can also see Moloch standing right beside him with the roses. And that kind of ties into the issue later. But it's quite, I didn't make notes on it, but actually sitting and going through the book very slowly, there are a lot of things that I kind of stand out and jump out.
I always remember reading this Daredevil story years ago. I think it's called like Guardian Devil or something, where he like gets this baby and has to like protect it or some shit. There was a scene in it where it was like 1-page panel where it was like a funeral, and it was like the Marvel Universe attend this funeral, and you saw like Doctor Strange at the front, and then at the back you can see like silhouettes and you know who it is and shit. It's a shame, really, but I understand that it's a very tight storytelling. The comedian's funeral, we literally see who we need to see. It would have been, because you've got to think, who would attend the funeral of this like maverick diplomat, terrorist?
Yeah, exactly. And it's only the people who knew him and perhaps saw some good in him at some point that have made an attendance, because there's definitely no women there. Like Silk Spectre, I don't know. I'm going to spoil it anyway. Comedian is Silk Spectre's father.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's not even attending, obviously she doesn't, but still. And the fact that Silk Spectre Senior hasn't told her that the comedian's her father, it's kind of, I don't know, it's a bit, it's one of those things I think Silk Spectre will look back on and think, oh, maybe the comedian wasn't that bad of a guy and I probably should have attended his funeral. And much in the same way that our mother's doing.
Yeah, completely. It is quite dark that she doesn't reveal it, knowing that he's died as well, which is kind of a normal point in like soaps. Like if someone dies, like, oh, it's your father or something like that. But it's like it's not there's nothing really put across there. And getting into like the later panels, I like, again, there's no kind of sanctity, like, not to be too graphic, but you see Silk Spectre's kind of old wrinkly bosoms in her garment. It's kind of there's no hairs and graces.
Yeah, definitely not. And it's really kind of shocking for the time. And then they do something later on that kind of also is a bit.
Oh, the Bible, the Tijuana Bible.
The Tijuana Bible. Which, I mean, obviously...
They were real, They were real things,
I'm sure I've seen...
I've got loads of them, mate.
Really? Oh, yeah. I'm sure I've seen one in American Horror Story, actually, in season 2. Which, anyway, back to the point. Yeah. It's obviously female comic book characters. I mean, you just have to look at some of them, like Supergirl, Power Girl.
Sure.
There are objects, like sex objects, and they're often drawn in a way that is very sexualized. I mean, if you Google a lot of the stuff that Rob Liefeld's done, all of his women have massive bosoms, massive arses, stick thin waists, but no one ever publicly says, "Oh, female comic book characters are sex objects," until Silk Spectre herself points out that she was used in a pornographic comic book at one point. So it's quite interesting to see that really cemented as, I was a sex object back then, and people did do drawings of me. I'm accepting of that. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It was all part of it, and again, in the sense of comedian's attack as well, it was all part of this subjugation that is kind of willingly accepted. And just a little quick bit of history for Wikipedia: Tijuana Bibles, also known as 8-pagers, Tilly and Mac books, Jigs and Maggie books, JoJo books, Bluesies, Greybacks, and 2x4s were palm-sized porno comics produced in the US from the 1920s to the early 1960s. Their popularity peaked during the Great Depression era. So I love, Alan Moore is obsessed with comic history in a certain extent, and he's so knowledgeable. And I love that he brings these in, and they're like, a real affectation of the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite strange to imagine these actually knocking about these days, but a lot of people probably own them for the fact that they were so famous, and they're used in TV shows. I mean, in American Horror Story, it's basically a German concentration camp doctor who has one knocking about, and it's not ever highlighted. It's just a prostitute's going through his drawers, and she sees a lot of pictures of bondage in one of a Tijuana Bible as well. So it's quite it's very much of its time, and it once again surmises that Silk Spectre Senior, no matter how bad it was in the past, always looks back on it fondly. There's people who've been drawn pictures of her nude having sex with people, and she's looking back on it smiling, thinking, yeah, them were the days.
And we get quite a powerful panel on the third page of just, the three of them in front of the flag being folded over his coffin. It's brilliant. It's very effective. And I love the rain hitting the nameplate and that splash. Yeah.
Oh, it's really, really good. And a lot of times this is a really grounded depiction of a funeral. A lot of times in comics, you would at least get the feeling that the spirit had travelled up into heaven at some point, and maybe at the end of the funeral the sun would come out and someone would look up into the sky and a sun ray would come down and shine, what I mean, to make you feel maybe he's died, but maybe there's something that's happened here that was good overall. Whereas here, after the funeral, it's still raining, it's still dark, everyone looks sad, they shake hands and they leave, and there's no kind of feeling of closure. No. It's just the guy's dead. That's it.
and it's just a wonderful kind of the disparity of Dr. Manhattan standing there as well. Like, if he wasn't there, this scene, no one would question it as being like fantasy, but it's just kind of just the imposition of him there just really kind of relegates it to this, majestic kind of imagination. And here we have as well, Silk Spectre in that page as well, recounting the Minutemen who had left. So Hollis Mason and Byron Lewis, who was, Mothman, who kind of, for all intents and purposes, is kind of lost. Like, we see later that when they meet, he comes round with Hollis Mason for a drink in some flashback, and we see him kind of struggling to get onto his sanity. So, and it's odd as well that with the name The Comedian, Silk Spectre finds the need to do it at the end of page 3. There's also, like, in page 1, she says, I guess he finally reached a punchline. She also says he was a comedian. He always thought he gets the last laugh. It's like, it's weird that people need to take this moment to kind of pun off his name and kind of make it a joke. Yeah,
it is quite strange, but, this issue kind of explains exactly why he is called The Comedian as well. Because they say that he saw America's true face and kind of parodied it. Which is true. I mean, America's known for doing a lot of bad things like Vietnam. Obviously, a lot of soldiers were going over there, and a lot of innocent children and women were getting killed in this conflict. And the fact that The Comedian does that is sort of a satire of America. I mean, I don't want to say Americans are rapists,
right? But, I know. I never really. The Comedian is America. I can kind of see the argument.
He's the dark side of America.
Yeah.
But he's laughing it up. Like, Donald Trump can stand on a podium and say that all Mexicans are rapists and get, appointed president. Whereas, I'm sure the statistics are probably just as high in America. It's sort of this thing that you laugh and alienate the other, but you won't kind of, it's a joke when you do it. Like, The Comedian does so many bad things. There's friendly fire, there's dictatorship almost, and it's kind of, he is a satire of what the rest of the world kind of views America as, but he seems to be in on the joke, whereas everyone else kind of isn't.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that he was kind of drafted in by the government after the Keene Act shows that, they were such bosom buddies there. And we kind of close up with the, the Silk Spectre section, with the Tijuana Bible gets given as well. And just she's talking about it was sent by someone who's been sending her letters, a fan. So there's still this kind of, I guess in a certain sense, you have Comic-Con, don't you? And, fans like to give signatures and stuff like that. So it's kind of that still, even in this world, there's a certain admiration for these, superheroes and stuff. But we go back, arguably a literal flashback, because we get the camera, and then kind of going back and, our first real taste of this scene that we'd seen a lot of in, photos in the first issue, which is really exciting. Going back to the Minutemen stuff, I love all of these sort of stuff in the book, man. I love seeing these guys together.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. And the fact they're kind of using it as publicity as well. Yeah. I've just noticed there's a newspaper headline that scientists make first artificial wonder element plutonium, which that's kind of highlighting the time. You've also got the clock in the bottom corner. Yeah. Saying 1940. So that signifies exactly when it is, and it is just great to see how these superheroes started out, but it goes dark very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, literally in a page. If you look at the page, so we get the flashback in the last page. On page 5, there's the Minutemen meeting at the top right, top left, and then the bottom right is, oh shit, we know what's going to happen next, kind of thing. And, we have Eddie, we have the comedian, him trying to say, let me see if I can fish them out for you, the spots in the eyes. That's quite a menacing thing to say, even as a kind of flirty thing, like fishing someone's eyes.
Yeah, there is kind of a sinister thing. Feeling to it straight away. Another thing that I'm not quite too sure on, but they do it twice in this issue. I don't know what she's called. The black haired woman.
Yeah, Silhouette.
Silhouette. Thank you. She heavily implies that Sally is Polish, which Sally Jupiter denies straight away. which I don't know. I'm guessing that was a part of the Times. But it's then later followed up with Moloch. When Rorschach's interrogating him, he basically says Edgar William Jacobi, also known as Edgar William Vaughan, also known as William Edgar Bright, also known as Moloch. The first name, Edgar William Jacobi, I'm guessing that's Polish as well. And the fact that he's changed his name when he was Polish, and the fact that Sally Jupiter changed her name to be, I don't know what it was originally. It's not a very good research that I've done.
It's all good.
It's skipping my mind, but it's something similar to Jupiter, but it sounds Polish. Yeah. And I don't want to be racist and throwing things around like Jupiter-ish.
Right. But I mean,
do that.
It's there for us to see.
But it kind of shows that at the time, a lot of Polish immigrants were coming over to America and then trying to blend in as much as possible by changing their names. And it does let us know that we aren't living in this world where the world is accepting of other cultures and stuff like that. Which again sort of highlights the comedian's morality and intentions and the way that he acts throughout this issue. Like, it's very clear that America was quite racist and xenophobic, and the comedian sort of cements that. And the fact that we've got someone denying that they're Polish, well, two people denying that they're Polish, it kind of, it enforces that point very subtly, but by not doing really much on it.
Yeah. I think definitely. Silk Spectre Jr. makes a lot of reference to the Polish nature as well. I think in the first issue as well. And there's lots of stuff in just this opening panel of page 5, because obviously it's the first time we really see the Minutemen, not just posed. And I like as well where, one is Mr. Owl, which is quite sort of, I guess he's sort of humouring him to a certain extent. He's not saying Night Owl like Batman. You wouldn't say Mr. Bat to Batman, would you? You'd call him Batman. So I guess it's kind of a little in front. But that 8 prints, they'll be ready in a week. So obviously technology, we're a far cry from Dr. Manhattan. Like, we've got to wait for things to be developed.
And that's probably why everyone's got this photograph. Like, obviously, the entire team will know that there was an attempted rape after it. They'll probably not want to have that on their mantelpiece, but because of the time, they have to use that photo, because obviously they paid for it. It takes a week to get developed. There's only going to be 8 prints of it, which is quite strange because there's more than. Oh no, there is 8 members.
There is 8. Yeah, there is. Yeah. And
Nelly said something stupid there.
Let's go through from left to right quickly on what we think the costume. So what do you think
I was going to say.
What do you think of Mothman?
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
costume level.
It's literally a moth, isn't it, with his giant buggy wings, and he even has the sort of the antennae for some reason. I'm not sure why, but
you see Batman in the comic, and you think his costume's really good, and this is. But you think if anyone ever wore that in real life, you'd just be like, you look like a complete idiot. And Mothman obviously thinks he looks like a moth, but he looks like a complete, absolute idiot.
Yeah, he looks like a goon, definitely. And his wings, you can see, like when they're coming through the door on the next panel, they're just like gawpy and awkward. Dollar Bill, a bit more traditional, I guess.
Yeah, it's sort of got a Captain America cross with Superman look to it.
Yeah.
It's got the stars on it. It's blue and red. It's kind of more the traditional costume.
Yeah. I think Captain Metropolis as well is kind of, again, but it has what a lot of superhero costumes had at the time, the sort of the semi-mask, which allows your hair to come out.
Yeah, it's got like a mane coming out.
Yeah.
Comedian. Compared to what he would go on to wear, this is really ludicrous. Like, he's got a belt with a smiling face.
Yeah.
He's got a red clown button.
He's like a jester more than It's very garish. I think it's almost going for that sort of early 50s kind of, how it looked quite dated, like.
Yeah. Sally Jupiter's costume, it's not even like a superhero costume.
No. I don't really know what it's giving her.
Like stockings, tights.
It might be just a comment on sort of the disposability in the air at that time for the female. Hooded Justice, I think it looks cheap, but it's kind of cool with all the ropes.
Yeah, it's like a hangman costume. It sort of reminds me a bit of the Scarecrow. And his mask's very like dark and intimidating. So I'm guessing this is kind of the Batman parody, whereas Dollar Bill's sort of the Superman parody.
Yeah.
Comedian kind of looks a bit like Robin.
Yes, that's fair. Yeah. Night Owl for me, I love his feathered pants.
Yeah, and he's sort of got the pants that Robin would wear in the 40s.
True.
All the costumes are kind of taking elements from existing superheroes, except for Silhouette, where she literally looks like a teacher or a French artist.
Yeah, Silhouette's one's the least superhero one.
Weird. Yeah, you could probably get away with just wearing that in the street, and no one would say, "Oh, there's a superhero."
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Actually, yeah, that's almost like an alter costume for like when she's in a normal day job. But nonetheless, really cool scene. And I like when we go into the main room, we see like Mothman's like name on the desk.
Yeah,
it's cute.
So they've obviously had a meeting.
Yeah,
they've agreed. They've had their photograph. Everyone's having a great time. It's all fancy. It's all going to feel like they're going to do something. Then Sally goes to get changed, and it all kicks off.
Well, it's just dark because we have sort of them arguing amongst themselves really about where's going to go forward for the team, and they all agree to go back to the Owl's Nest for a beer, which is very good of him. But then we get for me the genius paneling going into the angle, watching her change from behind. Where she's still got her yellow on, and then now she's into her undergarments, and that high that hangs suspended, very ominous. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's just like really just well put together and drawn out, and it is like you do get an atmospheric feeling of tension. Also in the background, you can see Moloch's solar mirror weapon, which, at the time when this was going on in the 40s in comics, even up to like the 80s, all of the supervillains had some ludicrous weapon that was like using diamonds to power a laser on the moon that would shoot down at Earth, and it was all stuff like that. So the fact that they've confiscated a weapon like that and they just leave it hanging around in the background kind of speaks subtly to what was going on in comics at the time. But it's sort of juxtaposed by this ludicrousness of also like this absolute like horrific rape where comedians like punching her in the stomach, punching her in the face. There's blood dripping out of her mouth when she's on the ground.
There's something what I've realised looking back at this scene, which I mean I don't mean this in a weird way, but these are some of my favourite scenes of Watchmen actually.
I think they're so like
they're awful.
Out of the ordinary. And unorthodox, and you would not expect to pick up a comic. I mean, the comics were written for kids. And if your parent went, like in 1985 went down to a comic book shop and seen this and thought, I'll get that for little Timmy, because all kids at the time were called Timmy. It's a very popular name for children. Of course, they grow out of it once they hit 12. Anyway, I digress.
Timothy.
So you think, it's a comic, I'll pick it up for my son. He likes the Batman on the TV with Adam West on, and I'll pick up this one for him. What you reading there, Timmy? Just there's a man raping a woman. Well, I hope Batman jumps in and stops that man from raping that woman. No, the man raping the woman is the superhero. Oh, right, get that out. Get that out your hands now.
Well, I mean, the thing is, at its core fundamentals, the superhero narrative is pretty much as follows. Like, man attacks helpless woman or child, and superhero enters to save it. And you're right, this archetype of superheroism has infiltrated the initial meeting of this group. Within the ranks itself, it's had to play out in the room. It's just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And it kind of speaks to just how like weak the team was for the fact that this goes on and they still let him in. The Minutemen, they don't cast him out, and it's like it's very hard to kind of determine exactly what it means, but it just kind of shows that these superheroes, maybe they weren't like Rorschach, who is just black and white. Like if he's seen like this going on, he would have killed the person. Whereas these are like, yeah, it happened once. I'll let you off this time. It's very strange to kind of see that these are meant to be protectors and they're letting members of their group do this. And it's probably how comedian managed to ascend so far in the ranks of society, because people were willing to just turn a blind eye to what he did.
And sort of what he can do stems from the fact that, you know, he is a not a superhero, but, you know, he's a hero, quote unquote, a costumed hero. He's brilliant at fighting people, so of course he'd be able to subdue Sally easily. I mean, it's dark to think about, but it's true. Like, imagine if Batman wanted to rape someone, he could quite easily. Yeah, and it's kind of like it's just showing you if power corrupts. And it's the physicality as well. He smacks her in the mouth. He smashes her head on the floor. And then you see him grabbing for his belt buckle, and the hair's on his arse in the next. Like, it's just, it's gruesome. Yeah,
and it's like tying back to the whole how comedian is like a satire of America. Maybe Hooded Justice is also like, you know, a satire of England and the UK and the rest of the world. Like, America has committed quite a lot of atrocities. But because we're so reliant on them, they are sort of an ally. We always look the other way. And I'm guessing that's sort of what the Minutemen really are a metaphor of. Like, they've got this guy in the ranks who is definitely a satire of America. He's going around doing these horrible things, but, you know, he does good once in a while. So, we'll let him off. He helps us. And I don't want to get too political, but I'm guessing that's what they're sort of going for.
Yeah. And we see, you know, as with lots of Watchmen stuff, lots of great background stuff. For instance, King Mob's ape mask, which you see kind of looking on this horrific gorilla snarl, which kind of embodies that, you know, brutal masochism that the comedian adopts. He's even leaning against it when he starts talking to her, and it's just, his language is so awful. Like, what the hell were you doing here? I knew I was changing. And he's like, sure I did. You announced it loud enough? Like, oh, what a creep.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Like, he's totally read the situation wrong. And he's, but he doesn't, she even says no, and he goes... No, spelled Y-E.
Yeah.
And he's very forceful. And it's just not a nice kind of scene to look at.
No. And then Hooded Justice comes in, beats, you know, Eddie up really badly, says he's going to, like, break his neck and stuff, which is pretty full on. But then he stops, and I love how for the first time in the series, we see Hooded Justice's actual eyes, not the coloured sort of shade.
Yeah. And he looks very angry. It's a very well drawn. Like, even though he's got a massive mask in front of him, you can tell exactly what his facial expression is.
Yeah. It's penetrating. There's lots of close-ups in this. I love especially when she scratches Eddie, and then he pauses, and she's saying, like, Eddie, and you just know he's going to unleash now. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And just a little subtle thing. You've also got the clock. As Eddie's walking out the room. It's at 5 to 12, which is obviously a repeating theme throughout Watchmen. And then on the next page, you've sort of got her just lying there, bloody and beaten, like looking horrendous.
Blood dripping from her mouth, like she's really hurt, like it's awful.
He just says, "Get up and for God's sake, cover yourself."
Yeah,
and cover obviously sort of. They covered this up, and the public didn't find out about it till the release of Under the Red Hood. So it sort of also means, like, we'll cover yourself up, and also this is going to be covered up. We're never going to speak about this again.
Yeah, but I wonder how it was covered up, because I don't know if you learned this in Before Watchmen, but obviously I haven't read that, but I wonder how Night Owl found out. Obviously he would have just seen her and been like, oh, put two and two together, but... I don't know if that's detailed, but I love the Tijuana Bible as well. It's like, oh, say, baby, this is tops. And, like, it's just quite sort of...
They went from a rape scene
to,
a pornographic one.
Yeah, it's mad, It's very brave. And then, you know, you sort of see her fingernail on the book, and then she casts it down. And then, obviously, you know, what is she looking at, Sally? She's looking at the old picture yet again. She must have looked at this picture 1,000 times.
Yeah, he probably has relived that rape 1,000 times. But yeah, it is kind of weird how you just went from a rape scene in a comic to then her reading like a pornographic scene in a comic, and it's very, very like there's a complete dichotomy between the two, and it's not lost on me.
No, certainly not. And Sally has quite a brutal line actually, saying, at least I don't sleep with a H-bomb. Which is quite a sort of, it's quite a sort of piercing one. I've got to think as well, however long Dr. Manhattan's been going at this point, maybe a few decades, whatever, at least a decade, is he really, still attached to humanity through her, or he must have been chipping away for years?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the government have absolutely no idea what to do with the guy. They've taken him to this funeral, and he clearly doesn't care or want to be there. And they're just, the government's lost complete touch of the whole situation, and they think that by having Silk Spectre there to sleep with him, that he's going to stay loyal to the country. But yeah, it's just.
And we transition into Ozymandias, which I really like when we go back in time here. We sort of zoom in his face. That his face hasn't changed.
Yeah, he's not really aged.
No,
he's meant to be immortal as well, I think.
Right.
I don't think it's mentioned in the comics, but he's. I'm sure I read a Wikipedia article once saying that he was a centurion, so he'd been alive for over 100 years. And I'll quickly. You keep talking, and I'll have a look.
Yeah, well, I want to focus on, we have the second team we meet now, the Crime Busters, which are the kind of, ancestral legacy of the Minutemen, of course. And again, we have all the costumed adventurers here, and it might be worth us going through. I mean, the first person of interest is obviously the comedian, who I love. We know it's him. We can sort of recognise the outfit and stuff, but not only is he in a chair, not only has he got his feet up on the table and he's smoking and he's reading a paper, he's burping as well.
Yeah, and his costumes completely changed. Just went from the 1940s one to the gritty 80s costume. And it's just a complete change. Whereas that guy is still in that same costume, doing the same talk. Yep. But he's a lot older. His hair, his hairline's receding. His belly's a lot fatter. Yeah. He's just not. He's not doing the best.
No,
he's not with the times.
No, not at all. And I mean, what do you think of Ozzy's costume?
Yeah, it's all right, isn't it? It's a bit flamboyant, but it's definitely 80s. It's kind of big shoulder pads draped over things. I've just looking up Ozymandias now, and there isn't anywhere saying that he's a centurion. So
right, yeah, I wasn't sure if he was, to be fair, but I didn't want to question you.
Yeah, don't question me. Just let me run wild. I'm the comedian of this podcast.
Oh shit! Please don't do anything similar to him.
I will.
Oh no. And we see Rorschach and Night Owl, who kind of look like we've seen them before, really.
Yeah. Yeah,
Rorschach's a bit tidier, and he speaks a bit more logical in this section.
Yeah, so Rorschach, a big interesting thing that Rorschach has in this comic is his speech bubbles are completely normal, and he talks in full sentences. Obviously, this is before the whole thing that broke him. So he's quite a grounded person back then. He hasn't really witnessed the true horrors of crime fighting. So he's still normal. He's not jaded by anything, and he's just enjoying life. He's got his nice little scarf on, and he's just having a great time with his best mates. There's also a little clock in this room as well. I don't know if it's 5 to or 10 to 12, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The clock thing's carrying over. They're having the meeting at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very.
At least no one gets raped at this meeting.
No one does. I mean, it's kind of a telling image as ever. We have sort of Night Owl and Rorschach are kind of interested in it, as is Janie Slater. But obviously, Dr. Manhattan and Laurie are checking each other out, and sort of Ozzy's sort of standing holding court. And I love the storytelling on the next page, on the page 10, with the 3 panels at the top, where it kind of it's comedians sprawled out in front of all 3.
Yeah, exactly. He's in every panel, and it's quite strange that they broke it up like this. But it is a really nice effect. And you can see him reading the paper, which says Dr. Manhattan, an imperialist weapon, something Russians. I'm guessing it says by
Russians, probably.
By Russians. Yeah. It's kind of strange to see that he's having a meeting with him, and he's also reading a paper on him, and you can sort of see that he's reading something about Dick, which I'm guessing is
Nixon kind of runs throughout. But it's just a great sense of motion watching it, kind of the way that he transitions from each panel to panel, and the sense of shock on Captain Metropolis's face, and the fact that he's holding the word drugs kind of disembodied there, kind of half before he's putting it on there, and and then Rorschach as well. Look, this doesn't sound like something Rorschach would say. Obviously, I agree, but a group like this size seems more like a publicity exercise somehow. It's too big and unwieldy.
Which is exactly what the first one was.
Yeah.
Like, it was a complete publicity exercise, but obviously comedian's been through all that before. He knows exactly how it's going to go, and that's why he's just not really paying attention to it. He's just kind of shown up to this meeting to be as negative as possible, and just to tell Captain Metropolis how much of his time that he's wasting, and how ridiculous it is that he thinks vigilantes can make a difference in this world.
And comedian faces off with Ozzy as well. I love that panel, the bottom left, where the comedian's sort of lecturing Ozzy and he's kind of sitting down.
Yeah.
It looks great with all the characters behind looking quite embarrassed and shamed.
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Manhattan doesn't really look like anything, but everyone else looks a bit annoyed.
Yeah, Dr. Manhattan's just kind of... He's in the exact same, position that he is.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just standing still, which is a complete, it signifies exactly what his character is. He's just always standing still because he's not moving through time at all. He's just existing. And the fact that he's not moving at all, he's not really engaged in the conversation. He's just there. He's just present, which is sort of similar to how he is at the funeral.
And we get a taste of Ozymandias' grand plan as well, when comedian kind of confronts him with what would you do, and he says all it takes is a little intelligence.
Yeah. And then he sets the world on fire, which sort of gives Ozymandias the idea a bit, because you can see him at the bottom looking at the map and it's all burnt, and he realises, this guy is right, the world is going to go to hell if nuclear weapons start getting used, so I've got to think of something to do.
And in a sense, because part of the map survives... it's about sort of obliterating one part to kind of maintain a whole, which is... I was reading, apparently, by the way, Alan Moore discovered, late into writing, that the sort of Ozymandias' plan was part of, some 50s TV show episode. It was very similar. Scientists fake a nuclear attack to sort of convince the world to stop, warring. And I think he acknowledged it or something in the book somehow, so it's kind of quite cool. So, but I love... Again, we see the comedian in a doorway leaving... And, the first time he was here, he tried to rape someone. This time he destroys this, well-heeled plan. And it's quite fun as well to see, some of the things that Captain Metropolis put in here. Promiscuity and black unrest.
Yeah.
Which is just hilarious.
Yeah. Quite racist. Again, with the whole hating Polish people. That is what black unrest means, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, something... for your colourblind mind, I'm sure it does, yeah. And you've got to sort of comedian to a certain extent brought it all upon himself in his cruel irony by inspiring Ozymandias. He then kills himself and sends himself insane because of the plan. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's quite good. It's so well thought out. The little subtle things, just the way that Ozymandias looks at the map. It's just such a big payoff in the end. Looking at it on your first read, you wouldn't notice it at all. You just think, it's just... You probably would just skim past that panel and just read the speech bubbles. But it's so, significant to basically the grand plan.
Massively. And we go back on the following page, back to the funeral. I love that the sort of open top shot. Looking down, it's quite nice. The folded flag, the rain coming down. It's just, it's very powerful, very evocative. And again, we get another sort of flashback. This time, Dr. Manhattan, although I guess you could argue Dr. Manhattan is experiencing time at once, so it's never really a flashback. But, for this comic narrative perspective, it's a firework that takes us back to him and comedian in the bar, which is another like amazing scene.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Definitely one of the standout moments in the book.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's got the badge there, the smiley face badge.
Yeah.
Very clearly standing out on comedian's uniform. And it's just this drab, dreary bar that they're standing in after winning Vietnam. I mean, Dr. Manhattan pretty much won the Vietnam War single-handedly. And it's comedian sort of narrating how he thinks the United States would have went crazy had they lost the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Of course, in losing the Vietnam War in real life, it sort of made Russia think, oh, perhaps they aren't as dangerous as we think they are. Whereas if they had have won the Vietnam War in this way with a walking, talking super bomb, obviously, like, things are going to escalate and Russia's going to think, oh, crap, we need to really start making nuclear weapons because this guy can just show up to a country and win the war within a couple of days. It's probably best that we don't have Dr. Manhattan on Earth, because obviously the fear that he commands would cause a lot of countries to really rally together to fight the US.
Yeah, and the Nixon with the peace signs up is actually a sort of play on quite a famous scene when the last it was negative in real life. It was the last chopper out of Saigon or something like that. It's quite a famous moment where everyone's getting on the helicopter at the end. But this obviously shows Nixon casually walking in.
Yeah,
and,
he's coming in.
It's just wonderful. You can see NBC truck down below and the flag, and just everyone's just kind of it's a publicity opportunity rather than a war zone mostly. But obviously it's still quite grim in the fact where Eddie's got someone pregnant, and they are here to sort of, and very very painful scene yet again. Especially she turns very quickly. I've found she confronts him. She must know who he is, and then she goes to kill him or at least maim him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because he's been putting these things off. He's clearly been putting this off for as long as possible. She's wanting to be talking to him for a while. Yeah. And obviously he's been saying, oh, yeah, after the war. And then, she says, she realizes that he's just going to walk away from it, and she can't walk away from it. So she's going to give him something to remember.
Yeah, it's and I love seeing her smash the wine bottle and the shards kind of flying up and him turning round. And you see in the Gordon gin mirror kind of streak of reflection, and then when she cuts him, it's almost like a sort of anime scene when she's cutting him. Like, it's got this kind of like unrealness to it, because I guess it's a reflection, isn't it? So
the background's all kind of like an anime background, like lots of a solid color with lots of lines coming off it to kind of show the way that the bottle moved.
And it's a serious slash across the face.
Yeah, she gets him good.
Oh man, and we see the blood drip on the smiley face, and then he pulls for the gun, and there's the thing that I like really find impactful is her like tears looking at the gun.
Yeah, she knows what's going to happen.
Oh my god.
She can't believe it's escalated to this. She's meant to be carrying his child, and he's still the kind of person who would do this.
I know.
And Dr. Manhattan once again, sort of, he's very similar to Hooded Justice. He doesn't really do anything overall to stop this from going down, except for went from a rape, which was what Hooded Justice was there to witness, to a murder, which Dr. Manhattan has, and they both still let him be in the Watchmen.
Yeah, and he's actually, comedian says, "You watch me. You literally were watching me do this." And you had no influence on it at all. You could have changed the gun into steam, or the bullets into mercury, or the bottle into snowflakes, which is like, great kind of line there. Very, very powerful. And this is a great scene as well, this whole section, for kind of just embodying both the characteristics of these huge figures in the story. And, comedian also has the foresight, you don't really give a damn about human beings. I've watched you. You never cared about what's her name, Jamie Slayer, even before you ditched her. Soon you won't be interested in Sally Jupiter's little girl either. And you're out of touch, you're turning into a flake, God help us all. And then we see Dr. Manhattan staring down, and if you notice, he's disembodied through the table.
Yeah, and if you look up, when on the top right panel, he's actually floating above the ground slightly as well.
Oh, right, yeah, he is.
So he's just kind of detached from the whole scenario. He's just not really like that involved in it. And obviously, comedian like confirms that he just doesn't care anymore. You turn into a flake. So yeah, it's quite. It's clear he's just passing through this. He's not actually involved in it.
And it's kind of it's Alan Moore that's putting to the reader one of the most horrific situations ever: someone gunning down someone that got pregnant, you know, after cutting them across the face, and it's showing you how, you know, Manhattan really doesn't really care. Like, you know, you can just see that there's no. It's the same pose that he's striking all these years later, kind of thing. That kind of just sense of kind of trying to maybe fake some sort of attachment, but not being able to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just so well put together, and you just wouldn't expect to see this in a comic once again.
No.
That continues throughout Watchmen, but this really is like a standout moment of, this guy was a complete piece of shit, and he probably deserved everything that he got.
Yeah,
it's sort of once again he's satiring America, because America and Vietnam definitely killed lots of pregnant women, and they just moved on from it. And it's kind of exactly, it sums up the soldier mentality here that the comedian has, that, these people aren't American, they're not actually real people, so I can treat them how I want.
Yeah.
And Dr. Manhattan also kind of, you know, maybe he sees it the same way, except for he doesn't see people as actual anything at all. So the comedian doesn't see the Vietnam as real people, and Manhattan doesn't see people at all.
Yeah. And then the next panel, we get the sort of the trivium of the three guys here, and, you know, perhaps you can read into what's said of the homily here. Earth to Earth over, you know, Vite is probably, you know, he wants to save the Earth, I suppose, in some sort of sense. Ashes to Ashes could symbolise perhaps Dr. Manhattan, you know, his genesis, like, because he was disintegrated into ashes. And then Dust to Dust, as we've seen, you know, on Archie, on, you know, Night Owl's equipment, him as a person in a sense is quite dusty. You know, and it's all about the death of the costumed hero, really, Earth to Earth, Ashes to Ashes, because now we have what sort of happened after this meeting, you know, the true terror of the streets, and comedian with the gimp mask.
Yeah, it's very strange that he's got this costume now, but I don't really know what to make of it too much. It just seems to be like very domineering, and obviously that plays into exactly what the Watchmen are in this scene, where he is sort of this figure that's just completely dominating these people, doesn't care what he's doing to them. It's very sadomasochistic.
And it's just seeing Archie in this thing as well, these piercing eyes coming out, and everyone rioting below. Like, this is one of those pages you can really pore over. There's so much detail at the bottom.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Like, it must have taken so long to map out and draw, and there's so much stuff going on. And it's sort of America attacking versus America. And like, there's some things that you just wouldn't see in comics, like my son is a police officer, you faggot.
Yeah, exactly.
The police not wanting the Watchmen to exist, which really juxtaposes how police were at the time in comics. Like, they were happy to work with Batman. It's just completely the opposite to that.
Yeah, and just really showing you yet again the reality of what would happen if superheroes were around. Of course, there would be this friction between the establishment and, you know, what they are, and vigilanteism would throw everything into disrepute. So I love seeing this, and I love seeing, you know, probably for comedian, this is no different than Vietnam.
Nah, definitely not. He's just always fighting a war, and this is just another war to him. It just so happens to take place in America.
Yeah, and just going through as well the sort of I love him throwing that grenade, and like Night Owl's, you know, being really polite, like, I'm sorry, sort of thing. You haven't left any choice. And the grenade, and it's like between everyone's faces who are like, you know, looking at it and screaming.
Yeah, it's crazy. The guy just doesn't care.
No.
Night Owl's still trying to be a good person, and once again, it's someone seeing the comedian do something really bad and not really lifting a finger to stop it.
Yeah. And comedian mentions the government contract, the new act that's being heralded through the Keene Act. And you can also see the kind of the tear splatter on Archie with the sort of mud on the bottom.
Yeah, I've never really noticed that before, but yeah, you're completely right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's also almost like these inanimate objects are crying throughout the entire comic.
Yeah. It's just it's such an interesting motif that comes through, and I love seeing these guys together. Now, I don't know if I'm reading into this too much to stop me, but on the page 18, so the fourth panel where comedian's firing the gun, I can almost see a smiley face in that yellow
face, isn't it? Yeah. No, I think you're completely right.
But I mean, who knows? But yet again, we have Who Watches the Watchmen, but we don't really ever get to see it in full, which I love.
Yeah. So it's the same with the newspaper headlines. You're always kind of reading between the lines of it and making it up for yourself.
And I mean, as if to prove our whole theory of comedian being America, he does say, Night Owl says, what happened to the American dream? He says, it came true, you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Damn.
Exactly. The guy's like, yeah, all right. Yeah, I suppose you're all right.
It's a very badass kind of almost non-Watchman-y sort of line, but for the comedian it works.
Yeah, 100%. It's a very much like, what else did you think was going to happen if he gave complete power to a country?
Yeah.
Like, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's kind of what's happened here.
And, Dan now at the funeral as well in the flashback. Because obviously, as we've just seen, they've had some times together, him and the comedian. It wasn't just Rorschach and Night Owl. They would fight together in pairs as well. And him throwing the badge down along with the flag, I mean, very symbolic.
Oh, 100%. And that is sort of the end of the comedian. And it's very similar to the way that the comedian was thrown out the window. You know what I'm saying?
I love that. Yeah, I guess it is actually. I didn't consider that, but that's a good point. Yeah, and I love how you see the face of the smile, like looking down as it falls into the. It's very characteristically brilliant, and the shaking hands as well from Manhattan and Adrian, where they're cufflinks as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so they've both got like signature cufflinks.
And we go from the cufflinks of them to the kind of raggedy gloves of Rorschach watching on.
Yeah, as Moloch walked out. And he's just come to pay his respects. But he seems to be the only one that's really interested in paying his respects. Like, he's bringing a massive bunch of flowers, which no one else has. They've all just kind of showed up. Night Owl showed up and threw a badge into it, but that was about it. Like, no one else ever kind of showed them their respect, which is strange because Moloch was obviously... I mean, they hinted at his super weapon early on in the issue. He was obviously quite a big foe for the comedian. So yeah, it's like really just it is kind of what I imagine would happen. Like, obviously coming from a battle rap background, you do respect your opponents quite a lot.
Right.
When you've competed against someone and then it's all over and you're both kind of left after it, you do have a certain amount of respect for them because you've been through the same battle together, and which is exactly what's happened here. Moloch and the comedian have been through the same battles together, so they do have a lot of respect and admiration for each other, probably, which is why he's actually brought these roses along, whereas the other people attending the funeral probably didn't have any admiration for the comedian. And that's kind of clear by the way that they remember him.
And we get to Moloch returning home, which we sort of saw with Dan in the last issue, him kind of going back and Rorschach having broken in, being there to kind of suggest it. Like, him sort of chilling in the fridge is quite a inventive sort of way to ambush.
Yeah, really good. Like, it completely just jumps out of the scene as well, in the same way that Rorschach jumps out the fridge. Like, it's very somber and calm, and there's not any dialogue, and then he just jumps out and it leaps out the page almost, and just grabs your attention straight away. And it is strange once again seeing someone who's had this life now reduced to a crappy life after their career as a supervillain.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no sort of glory years for any of these characters. It seems we see in his kind of trash as well, like pizzas and ice cream, and just a sort of, I don't know what that really says about him, but you know what I mean. It's not kind of a luxurious life by any means.
Yeah, he's not house proud because probably no one's going to come round and visit him. Yeah. So yeah.
And just
the
way Moloch is, the fear in his face constantly. Like if you look at all pretty much 9 of these panels, he's being hassled by Rorschach in some way physically, holding from behind. And the way the bottom, so the 8th panel, his eyes, they're just like he's so scared.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely terrified. Like he knows what Rorschach's like, and he obviously knows that he's a massive supervillain, and he thinks, this guy's gonna kill me.
Yeah, and it's just kind of tragic, isn't it, as well, that comedian who, seemed quite successful in his life but never had any real relationships, he goes to Moloch, like his old foe.
Yeah, exactly, and that kind of ties back into the respect and admiration thing. You can only relate to people who've been through similar things to what you have, and Moloch's obviously one of the only people that can sort of see it from his perspective. Like, whilst the comedian was labelled a hero, he very much was a villain, and Moloch was a villain, and it's probably the only person that he can connect to in the world.
Sure.
He obviously can't connect to other people in the Watchmen because they have different morals to him, whereas Moloch's at one point were probably quite similar.
And this whole sequence here, these kind of final pages, is, kind of recapping comedian's visit to Moloch, revealing, like, I always felt, I don't know if you felt this, Dev, I don't know if it's Alan Moore just having fun, but it's quite coincidental that comedian, like, finds a list with people's names on it, and it's all very 60s Batman-esque in a sense.
Yeah, like, I was actually reading a Batman comic from a website, definition.co.uk, where I read through all of the Batman graphic novels in chronological order from start to finish to kind of see exactly how they are, and I'd review them. Make sure you go to definition.co.uk. And there is an issue where Batman's investigating Mr. Freeze, and he finds his hideout. I don't know how he finds it, but it just shows up there. Mr. Freeze is out murdering people, and he finds a list of names. 2 of them are crossed out, who were the 2 people murdered earlier in that issue, and he's got 2 names at the bottom, with a big one saying he's next written next to the one that he's trying to murder at the time. So he tracks him down, he stops him, and that is kind of it's exactly the same really here, where he's found a list of names. He's sort of got in on the plan, and he wants to get out and stop it.
Yeah, and just so much of what comedian is confessing here, he's crying in a certain extent on the foot of this bed, saying, I shot kids in Nam, I've done bad things to women, I've never done anything like this. It's like almost trying to reason with himself, like, you have done some absolute atrocities, comedian. Like,
they weren't as bad as this.
Well, no, they weren't as bad as this, but I wonder how comedian, like, found out...
No, I mean, like, comedians saying
I've
done bad things, but I can justify them, which, you still can't really.
But I wonder, I always wonder, how did comedian discover this shit? Like, did he see a monster and think, oh, that's going to destroy New York? Like,
he mentions saying, I should have never looked out the window.
Yeah.
And obviously it was a plane flying over that, and he must have been curious about it and said, oh, what's that? I want to get... And then they said, oh, that's like top secret something. And then he probably kept asking questions, saying he wanted to get involved, and then he found out about it and was like, oh, this is horrific.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's a little murky, but it's not anything that affects the story or anything. But we get to, Moloch again, and Rorschach kind of taking the drugs from him. Rorschach, who, despite his shabby lifestyle, is quite up on the date on, like, what's legal drug-wise. And
yeah, well, he's obviously, like, researching stuff like this, and he probably obsesses over it and reads legislations every day. So he knows the ins and outs of what's good and what's bad, but it's actually quite good to see that he sort of forgives Moloch for having these drugs because he's got cancer. And, Moloch is a reformed villain. Like, it is clear that he's not out doing, like, villainous acts again. So, maybe, I have said several times that Rorschach is very black and white, but this kind of, shows that maybe he isn't completely, because he lets him off the hook for having these apparent cancer-saving drugs.
And obviously the cancer ties to the lists that he's on with Janie Slater, mentioned by Comedian. So that's kind of just a little kind of inference there as well. And then we pretty much go back into Rorschach's journal to end the whole issue. And Rorschach kind of closes it. We have him walking across the sort of the porno areas, the downtrodden areas. Enola Gay and the Little Boys is reference to the Hiroshima bomb drop, which is very nice as well. I love the whole American love, like Coke in green glass bottles. I don't make any. Like, it's this beautiful stuff that Rorschach comes out with. Always nice to hear. And him going back to the funeral, back specifically to the grave plot. And, clearly the whole story has really stuck with him. There's a certain respect that he has for the comedian that has led him to investigate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he is, like, very sorrowful. He seems to be the only one who's kind of mourning him, because he went back to revisit his grave and pay his respects, because he obviously couldn't do it in the day. But then you get a flashback of all the horrendous things that the comedian's done. And you get this absolutely brilliant joke to end the comic on. It's very well told, and it's sort of, I don't know if you want to read it out, it's quite long, but
the Pagalici, isn't it, kind of like, go see the clown, that'll tell you, doctor, I am the clown, which is, the classic joke, but so
the man
impactful.
Goes to the doctor, says he's depressed, and basically the doctor says, I know the perfect treatment for you to cheer you up, go see the clown, and he says, I am the clown. Yep.
And then as this joke's being told, you see Comedian at the end of Moloch's bed with the drink pouring out. It looks very like a confessional.
Yeah, and there's clearly the cross hanging above his head. And it's very clearly pointing towards religious aspects of humanity when, they're finally confessing all of the bad deeds that they've done, seeking righteousness and forgiveness.
And the bottom of this, which is I am Pagalici, him being thrown out, we see the exact same image at the start pretty much of issue 1. But obviously what's said then is ground floor coming up, and now it's the more elevated I am Pagalici. I don't know if this image crops up again. It very well might.
Yeah, I thought it was Pagliacci.
Well, no.
Hate in the comments, you know what I mean?
All our Italian brethren.
I did avoid using it when I was telling the joke, because I don't exactly know how to pronounce it.
And
I remember Eek did a song on it, and basically the whole song was about this joke.
Yeah, didn't Innuendo mention it as well, the battle rapper?
Yeah,
I think he did.
I'd say not. Eek will have read Watchmen 75 times, but Innuendo probably never read it in his life.
No, he'd probably think it was a gay slur or something. So probably best. I don't watch fucking men, right? And then we get, Comedian again. We've heard that the force was so hard that it sent his skull up into his stomach or some shit like that. So he drops to the ground. The red fades to the red of, the rose. And it's just a brilliantly kind of quiet ending. Rorschach putting the rose into the pillow and walking out of this graveyard.
Yeah. It makes, to be honest, Rorschach is like the most likable character I find.
Yeah.
And it's just because of these somber moments like this. Like, he does seem the only person who still wants to do good in the world. He might not go about it the best way, but he's got a good heart, and this kind of confirms that.
And we end, as we always do, with the sort of the full quote of the song, which is the Elvis Costello song, and I'm up while the dawn is breaking, even though my heart is aching. I should be drinking a toast to absent friends instead of these comedians. So
which is a perfect quote.
Yeah,
like, you would think that Alan Moore had made that up.
Yeah.
He might have just made it up and put Elvis Costello on the end.
Maybe.
He might not have. I'm not a big Elvis Costello fan, so I don't know, but it's the perfect quote to sum up the issue. Yeah.
I don't know. My dad's actually quite an Elvis Costello guy, so I've sort of heard a little bit of his stuff, but I could definitely imagine him singing this. And the final thing, as ever with these issues, is the kind of the back pages, the sort of the written text. Here we have Under the Hood, Chapter 3. Under the Hood is some of my favourite stuff, actually, of these written stuff. I think Hollis's autobiography is really interesting. This is more about the sort of formation of the Minutemen. I mean, I guess just general points we found interesting from it. One of the ones that I liked was him getting his nickname from, like, a police officer as an insult.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's just a great issue. I think it's much better than the first story. And this is a lot more superhero centric. And I just really enjoyed reading this one. I'm not a big reader if it doesn't have a little drawing beside it. So yeah, this was really good to get into.
And, you know, the story of how he had, like, you know, he originally tried to do a cape and then went without it. And then how he almost got, like, knifed through his mask and stuff. Like, yeah,
and he got pulled down over his face and he couldn't see what was going on exactly. Which is it kind of speaks to the impracticality of having a costume. So, like, the cape, obviously Dollar Bill got murdered for having one. And in The Incredibles, they clearly say, like, don't ever have a cape.
Yeah.
I don't know if that kind of was taken from Watchmen, but don't have a cape. And the one of the only surviving members didn't have a cape, and that's probably why he lived so long.
Yeah. And you get the story of Dollar Bill, who, you know, gets caught in the door, doesn't he? His cape, and he gets shot, basically dead. Which is kind of, I love that story of Dollar Bill as well, interesting. And I love the picture as well of the X-Men, the X-Men. They need a Watchmen X-Men crossover, but of the Minutemen Christmas party. So many things to like in this picture. I mean, first of all, being it says in the thing Captain Metropolis in the mirror, and you can sort of see him holding you can't actually see him, you can see the camera being held, but the fact that it's Moloch's weapon that they're using, like, as a backdrop.
And you've got the comedian there kind of being a bit forward to the Hooded Justice looking on angry. You find out that Hooded Justice dated Silk Spectre in this little reading. He's looking on angrily at the comedian. You've got Mothman with his mask off, looking quite sheepish. It's just
you've got sort of Dollar Bill and Night Owl looking quite super heroic, actually.
They're like, we're heroes. Whereas the other side of everyone else looks kind of out of place a bit.
And there's, tons of great stuff here. Like, they mention Captain Metropolis being a Nazi, and that kind of ties into the Black Unrest stuff. And very dark that Sally, Jupiter's agent, pressured her into not pressing charges against Comedian.
Because she knew the publicity would be so bad. And it's interesting that she got into this to be a model. And it kind of, it's a bit like Instagram to me, but like, she's found this cause to attach herself onto. You know, when you see, like, Facebook models with their profile picture and they do it, like, with a filter on to either say that they support gay pride or France when there was the terrorist attacks, and they sort of try and tie in their modelling with, like, a cause, so the two are aligned and it gets them more publicity. And it's sort of similar to that in the way that Silk Spectre's, you know, she was looking at ways to market herself, and this was a good way to do it.
No,
I might be wrong.
No, in a maligned way. No, you're right. And, you know, it doesn't really... One of the things that it doesn't discuss this chapter, and I don't think is really discussed in the book, is, like, the Minutemen, like, what did they actually do as a unit? You know what I mean? Like, it would have been great if they, like, if one of the chapters was him describing, like, okay, here's the crime we fought and the people we took down and stuff. But
there might be one. I've never actually read these sections of the book, to be honest, till this read through. So is there one later on, or is it?
I don't think so. I don't believe so.
Right.
No, I think there might be another Under the Hood chapter, but I think in Before Watchmen they might cover it. But I haven't actually read that section, so I mean, let us know. Watching the Watchmen pod at gmail.com. Let us know in the comments. We pretty much wrapped up issue 2, and it's another incredible issue, Dev.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's just really good. Like, when it first started, I thought, oh, this is going to be a bit of a filler issue, but it quickly proves that it isn't. Like, that my memory of this, a lot of it comes from the film. So actually, I've read this 3 or 4 times, but I've probably watched the film about 30 or 40.
Really? 30?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, I've watched it quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite comic book films, to be honest. So actually reading it again and seeing the source material, it is a lot better. And yeah, it's just nice to revisit these moments and just see like how standout they were. Like there are quite a lot of sections in the film that aren't done perhaps in the best way. Like one bit that I really don't like is when the comedian and Night Owl attack the citizens. And for some reason, I always think, "Oh, that's a terrible moment." But reading it in the book, it's really enjoyable, and there is quite a lot going on.
Yeah, no, entirely. And obviously, we'll have to get to the movie eventually. But Def, this has been great as ever. I guess I'll see you back at issue 3, man.
Yeah, I'll see you then, kid.
And I want to say as well, subscribe to us on iTunes if you haven't yet.
Please.
We're on there, and maybe we'll do some like other comic book stuff sometime as well. Like do like top 5 favorite, non-Watchmen stuff or whatever.
I wouldn't mind turning this into like a monthly comic book thing. I do enough as it is, but I want to do more. So yeah, I'm up for it.
All right. Yeah. Well,
you've said it live. You've said it recorded now. So yeah, you've got to do it.
All right. Well, Def, as ever, man, this has been great.
Yeah, take care. Cheers, bye.